Hey everyone, welcome to another LeetCode video. Before we get started, if you could like and subscribe, that would help us out a lot. And if you saw some of the mock interviews that we do on this channel and you're interested in signing up for any one of those, then feel free to check out the links we have in the description for our website and a form that you can fill out. If you fill that form out, then we'll be in contact and hopefully help you out for preparing for your technical interviews. So we have a LeetCode question here. It's actually a really easy one. I could see this being asked kind of in an intern or maybe a new grad role where they just want to, during the phone screen, they just want to make sure that you can code, basically to fact check you on your resume, make sure that you can follow some basic steps to come to a solution. So for this one, it's called number of steps to zero. So the general idea here is that we have two conditions and we're given a number as our input. So our first condition is that if the number is even, we divide it by 2. Otherwise, we subtract 1 from it. So basically what you can think of here is you just want to loop through starting from the number you have here, maybe keep track of a counter, and you're just going to basically follow the two conditions that they set in the question at the top. So anytime that the number is divisible by 2, we will divide it by 2. Anytime that it is odd, we can basically just subtract 1 from it, and then we're just going to do that in some loop until we hit 0, and then we return the amount of steps that we did. So to get started, we can just have a count, initialize that to 0. So this is going to be what we return at the end. So we can actually put that here. So now we have to fill out basically the loop and follow each of the steps as we go. So our condition is going to be while our num is not equal to 0, because when it is 0, we're done and we can return our count. So while it's not equal to 0, our first condition is that when the number is even, we want to divide it by 2. So if our num mod 2 is 0, then num is going to be the floor division divided by 2. So here we're actually just using this double divide sign in Python 3 that allows us to make sure that we take the floor so that we don't get any floats and we keep everything as an integer. And then our second condition here, which is the only other case, right, is when it's odd, and here we can just subtract 1 from our number and reassign it. So the only thing that we're missing now is, remember that basically, by setting up our conditionals like this, we know that one of the two sort of constraints that are set in the problem are basically the two things that we're working for. Only one of them is going to be hit. So all we're really doing is counting the number of iterations in our while loop here. So every time we do anything, we just add 1 to our counter. So as you can see here, if the number is even, that's what this mod division, the mod operator, is for. So we're basically checking the remainder of our number divided by 2. If the remainder is 0, then we know that it's even. And we can just divide it by 2. Otherwise, it's odd. So like it says, we subtract 1 from it. And no matter what, we have to make sure that we increment our count. So why don't we just go ahead and run this, and we see if we get what we expect. And we see that we have 6, 4, and 12, which is exactly what we would expect for these numbers here. And beforehand, it would be a really good idea to kind of use this scratch space to go through each of these steps here and see how it gets broken down, so you can catch, basically walk through with your interviewer and say, here's a manual test case, this is what I expect to happen, so our count should be updated in this way, and so forth. So even though this is a very easy question, and initially just looking at something like this, it may seem a little weird to have to worry about, in say a more advanced technical interview, you probably won't be seeing this. But if the interviewer said, basically, what if you could do this some other way rather than using this loop, maybe using binary, for example. So because we're dividing by 2 every time, that should have sort of like tipped off your mind that there's probably a way to do this by decomposing it into a binary number. So we're going to work through that solution now. And again, if this was just like a code screen and they really just want to see if you're an intern, maybe you're a second year in college, and you want to basically just show that I did pay attention in my classes, I know what the mod operator is, I know to watch for my data types, things like that. This would be totally fine in that case. But if you want to kind of show off a little bit, there is a fancy way you can use binary to get to this answer. So the first thing we're going to do is I'll just type up the solution, and then we can talk about it as we go through, and then we'll talk about why it works sort of after. So the first thing we can do is we can just set num equal to the binary representation of our number. And the way that binary looks in Python is it looks something like this if you use this data type. So it's going to say 0b and then whatever your binary number is. So in order to get rid of these first two things, we can just slice it and we can say I just want it after this second one here. So that way we just get this, right? So now we have our number as the binary representation of the number. So now all we can do, we can actually just return the length of it, of what we just have there. So length of num minus 1, and then we just add the amount of times that we see the number 1. So let's just run this and make sure we get what we expect. And we do. We get 6, 4, and 12. So off the bat, this might be a little bit confusing as to why this works. But if you can think about it, if you give it a number like this, let's get rid of the beginning just so it's a little bit clearer. Every time that we see a 1, we're going to have to subtract 1. And we're basically working our way from right to left and shifting our number a bunch of times. So you could do this actually with a while loop and using the logical operators like the bitwise and things like that to do this. But we can just kind of use the built-ins here just to make our lives a little bit easier. So no matter what, we have to shift this length minus 1 times in order to check every single one of these elements. If you were to do this in a loop, every digit is going to be a shift 1 time. So that's what this covers here. So this covers shifting it every single time. And if you notice, if any time in this furthest right bit here we have a 1, we have to do that subtraction operation, right? So by adding the amount of 1s we have, we can basically say that here we have the total amount of shifts that we need to do. And then here, or in reality a shift, right, is divided by 2. So we have the total amount of times we have to divide by 2 here. And then the total amount of times we have to subtract 1 here. So this is just another quick little way you can do it with Python. I think that using binary numbers and showing that you're comfortable with the 1s and 0s is a really great skill to have. So if you could recognize a simple question like this, that again is probably going to be used just to see if you know anything about coding. It's kind of like a FizzBuzz question. But the fact that you can expand on this and then maybe say, just kind of like as an anecdote at the end, if you've already solved it with the initial solution, you can just say, there's a way to do this with binary. I recognize that every time we divide it by 2, that's a shift, and then you're basically just keeping track of these 1s here. So this is just something to keep in mind. I think, like I said, binary numbers, if you're really good with them and you see that a question is asking for divide by 2 or something of that sort, definitely have that in your mind to set off the alarm that there's probably a way to do this by converting the number down into binary. So thank you very much, and like I said, if you want to conduct any mock interview with us, then definitely check out the links below. Please like and subscribe, and thank you very much.